Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have a great discussion today. I can tell you, I've already learned from this person just in our pre-preparation. And so we really are going to have a great discussion today. So please join me in welcoming Daniel Hodges to our program today. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Great. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Daniel Hodges, JD, which is, of course, Juris Doctorate, is an activist dedicated to assisting others with disabilities and chronic illnesses to reach their full potential. While in law school, Daniel founded Pieces of Me Foundation, a nonprofit organization that promotes universal access and inclusion. Daniel's perspective has been shaped by his experience as a blind man with chronic pain and other conditions. He has spent a lifetime surpassing the low expectations placed before him, and his personal calling is to help others do the same. So again, Daniel, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Well, we talked about it a little bit in the bio, but tell us really about how you got to where you are today and how, this truly is your passion in life.
Absolutely. So I was born blind, and we didn't know at the time, was also born with a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Okay.
And that would present itself more in my teen years and in the early adulthood, where the chronic pain and injuries were more involved and just didn't seem to go away. But even with the vision, they struggled for the first few years to get any kind of handle on what was going on and even get any kind of diagnosis. Turns out I have a condition that, if you look through PubMed or any of the other scientific literature, not well described in the way that it presented in me. So it's reflected in the fact that I've seen eye doctors from coast to coast and back again, and never did get a firm diagnosis. Never really did get a handle on things. So, that in and of itself left my family in a bit of a lurch, trying to figure out what's going on, what can be done.
Right.
And at that same time, you had schools and other community facets that didn't have the tools they needed to give me proper education or proper socialization and such. So I actually effectively missed 5 years of my K-12 education where they homeschool me, and girls weren't accessible in the whole lot. And I took those experiences, got some really good training in young adulthood, and started to get back on track going to school, where, again, the chronic pain, the anxiety, other things started to really rear, and I had to circle back and start all over again. And so about 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, a mentor of mine said, look, you're articulate, you're smart, you have developed these advocacy skills that are teaching people, are helping people become more aware. Why wouldn't you go to law school? And well, my academic record isn't great, and I don't have a lot of money, and I don't know if I'm smart enough, and law school and chronic pain and fatigue don't really go together, and this litany of excuses.
You were giving yourself low expectations.
I was, and that's exactly what she pointed out to me. And 2 days later, another mentor of mine who had known me for almost a decade by that point and didn't know the first person came and said, "Oh, exact same thing. And I'm like, well, clearly this is a sign. So I put in my application for financial assistance for the LSAT, received that, because that's, that test alone is a few $100.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And took that, made some applications out, went around with vocational rehab, which we may get into later. And a year later, I was in law school. The following summer, I'm talking with my cousin who had a daughter who was born with a limb difference, and self had experienced an injury and had really started to develop chronic pain and had to leave the workforce because of it. And we're talking about how her story is so similar to mine and so many I've known, where for all of the effort that society has put into disability related stuff, so many people are still falling through the cracks, or they're getting assistance that really misses the mark, or so on and so forth. And I'm like, I've had this idea in my mind. What if we created an organization that harnessed the power of the crowd? We are 1 in 4 Americans.
Say that again.
1 in 4 at least. And I would make the case, if they were defined properly, it would probably be over half.
Right.
Now, that power has not been harnessed. And so I'm like, what if we did that? What if we got people together looking at the common experiences that we deal with, the stigma, misconceptions that maybe it's a little different for someone who's blind and someone who's deaf or someone who's a chair user, but really underneath, there's so many commonalities. What if we did that? What if we took the resources, the insights that each of these people has, and created the Wikipedia of disability resources? How could that change the narrative? And so I'm like, hey, you want to try it? She's like, sure. And 2.5 years later, she's still scratching her head over what I talked her into. But here we
I love it. Well, and it's called the Pieces of Me Foundation. And pieces in this case is PEACES. So explain to us why you have that word play.
Absolutely. Part of my journey has been figuring out that while my eyes do not work properly, while my joints do not work properly, while whatever else is happening, I'm not broken. I have my own characteristics. Same with Christy. Her body doesn't do what she wants it to do. Her daughter does not have part of her arm and hand. That's okay. That's how we're made. And that, leaning into that, saying our characteristics are our characteristics, our talents, our gifts, they're still there. And it helps us bring something new and innovative to the table. So we're not broken, but what empowers us is realizing that who we are is who we're meant to be. And we can go and create a positive impact regardless of our characteristics and circumstances. That's the spelling of that name.
I love it. And as you say on your website, it's that strength and peace that come from your ability to embrace your entire identity.
Exactly.
I love it. And then you have as your symbol, the butterfly. So talk to us about that.
And by the time that you get this episode out, I'm going to have a slightly different logo, which is the plan at least, but it plays in here. We started with the monarch butterfly that had the caterpillar with it, trying to show that transition from being the caterpillar that's scared and not really sure of its place in the world to the butterfly that everyone recognizes is ready to flourish. And we discovered last fall that there's another kind of butterfly called the comma butterfly that appears to the outside world to be broken, but its wings function precisely as it's supposed to. So we thought that was a great analogy, and it's something unique. Most people don't use that butterfly. Almost everybody butterflies, the monarchs. So we're like, we can differentiate ourselves here, but that's the nexus of it.
Mm-hmm. I love that concept because it is so true that, we're scared, to go into kind of that cocoon state because we don't know what the heck is going to come out. And whatever comes out truly is beautiful. Of course, what happens is people, there are some people who look at that and go, ooh, okay, whatever. But there are so many more people who look at that and go, wow, how cool is this?
Absolutely. And to that point, we don't want to be Pollyannish about the process either. I mean, even as we're sitting here talking, I'm moving my leg around because my hip, which has been deformed since actually before I was, is deciding whether or not it wants to stay properly in socket. And it's not fun. Right. But it is what it is. And I can let the pain and discomfort define what I'm doing, or I can try to almost distract or lean into, or however you want to put it. Say, look, I'm having a great conversation. Hopefully our conversation will touch someone and help them change their perspective or lean into who they are. And so it's really a matter of where am I going to put my energy?
Right. And I didn't tell you this before we started the program. It's been, about 5.5 years ago now, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And it had to be special and have every complication you could possibly have. And, all sorts of things, but that has led to issues with me, and it's an ongoing thing. And, and there will just be things that I have to deal with forever, one of which is chronic pain caused by the medicines that I take. And, people are like, oh, you're so upbeat, you're so happy. Well, that's what I choose to show people. But I tell them, there's also, it's perfectly fine to have those pity parties. To oh, woe is me. Why did this happen to me? As long as you don't get stuck there.
Feel those emotions, acknowledge part of the process, just don't stay there.
Right. Yeah.
Don't get trapped there.
Well, and I tell people it's actually, anyhow, my perspective is it is important to have those pity parties because, you mentioned being Pollyanna. We do have to on occasion go, and it happens. I mean, there are just days where I think I am not getting out of bed today. Just not going to happen. Or I go to do something and I realize I can't, or I have to nap. Naps are good, but it is part of that. But I definitely think that humor plays a very big part of things. There are times where my doctors are like, oh dear Lord, it's her again. But at the same point, I've had them say, you brighten our day too. And, and I remember I was going in for, I've had over 20 surgical procedures. And I was going in for one, and I'm exactly like I am here. I'm chatty Cathy. I'm yada, yada, yada. I mean, I'm actually in the surgical room and they're preparing me. And I hear two of the nurses say, oh dear, she must be very nervous. And I said, well, I am. I said, but you know what, if I can make you laugh, then this is going to be better. And so it's just kind of one of those things. Like you said, we go, all right. So we move on.
Absolutely. I have to tell you a quick story there. Speaking of the humor, the kids' mom and I, we have 3 kids, and we were in an evaluation for our youngest child when he was still pre-diagnosis. We knew that he had the genetic mutation to have the eye cancer that he would have inherited from his mother. And we were still waiting to catch the tumor so that we could begin treatment. Right. And we had a rapport with this doctor for years. He had taken us through the treatment of our daughter. And we consider him almost to be part of the family. And so we're doing this evaluation for our son, saying, okay, well, at least if we get if we find the tumors, at least we can start treating them. We know they're coming, it's over with. And so the doctor has a resident or an intern with him that day, and he's like, okay, we're going to take him back and we'll do the evaluation together. We'll come out and tell you what we find. And this doctor, knowing full well our sense of humor, out about 45 minutes later, it says, pop the champagne, we found the tumor.
Yay! Of course, everybody else is like, oh my gosh.
Awesome. And of course, it was small and it was very treatable, and we're on our way, and we're all celebrating, and this poor resident is absolutely mortified.
He's thinking these people are wackadoodle.
Exactly. Exactly. But it comes down to, I mean, I had a surgeon come out once after I had my right femur operated on, and he's telling my wife at the time and mom, he's like, he almost broke my saw. His femur is almost as hard as his head. I mean, you have to, at some point, you have to find humor in these things.
Oh yeah. And it's just, it's part of human nature to do that, right? To try and it's not just making the best of it. It's actually kind of going above that. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure you were absolutely terrified for your son. There was just that, but you knew what was coming. You knew that you could deal with it. It's, I always tell people, especially, they'll contact me and they'll say, I've had my biopsy and I don't have the results yet. And I say, this is the worst point. When you do not know what is coming, because your brain goes to the absolute worst place, and once you have that diagnosis, once you know this is okay, now we start, then your brain can cope with it, but I tell people also, ignore Dr. Google. That's probably one of the worst things to be doing.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you were asking earlier about how I got to this place. So I think this also ties in. When our daughter was born, we were first-time parents. We were in our early 20s, and a whole nother story about how the state of Colorado tried to intervene based on having blind parents because they didn't think blind people could parent. That's all happening while we're fighting our daughter's cancer battle in 2008. And with retinoblastoma, the genetic kind, there is anywhere, I guess, a 4 to 10% chance that the cancer could sprout a third set of tumors in the center of the brain, what's called the pineal gland. So it goes from being bilateral, meaning both eyes, to trilateral, meaning both eyes plus the brain.
Okay.
It is almost universally fatal, especially back in 2008. It is absolutely worst case scenario, and it's terrifying.
Right. Oh, especially as a 20-year-old new parent. Oh my gosh.
But we talked with the doctors about it. We said, okay, if this were to happen, there's nothing we can do to stop it. What do we do to prepare for it? You learn which hospitals have at least some survival rate with this condition. You say, okay, if we get a positive MRI, which in the cancer world always means something bad.
I know, positives bad. You don't want positives.
What do we do? Who do we call? How do we arrange things? What are our next steps? We had that mapped out ahead of time so that if that call were to come after we get done crying and throwing things and whatever have you, now we know what to do.
Right.
And thankfully, we never had to go that route. But it really did prepare both of us as activists and advocates to be able to say, we've gone through the steps and we want to spend each of our careers helping other people who are going through any number of things. Just try to stay balanced, stay in the moment, be prepared, and just do anything in the world but panic. so that you can get the best results possible.
Right. Right. And you can do a little Chicken Little, and run around. Like you said, you spend that little bit of time, but then you go, okay, now what? And yeah, I mean, it's for anybody who is listening or watching, it is okay to panic. There's nothing wrong with you to have that panic. And it is healthy. I mean, you kind of have to deal with that, but it's, then you go on, and of course, whatever it is, you have to go on with what feels best for you. I have people who talk to me and they say, hey, we're not going to do chemo. And I say, that's your choice. I did have people who weren't happy that I had chemo, and that was actually what about did me. And I had one dose of chemo that was like catastrophic. I was at 0.5% that gets a negative reaction, and I did. But for me, that was the best choice. For other people, it might not be. And for whatever it is, you need to make those decisions and go on with it, knowing that it was your choice.
And likewise, being allies, we have our own opinions. Sometimes we know things that the person we're trying to help doesn't know. Sometimes that can be useful, or we might think vital, but at the same time, I've yet to see a case where beating someone over the head with something actually helped them. Right.
Yeah, they're not going to pay attention. And it's interesting. I was actually reading on your website the tricks to become a better ally for people. And one of the things you talk about is to ask before attempting to assist. And I think that is so important because, we as the helpers, we want to be helpful. We want to, all these things, but sometimes we make the situation worse. So talk to us about that. Why is it so important to kind of take that pause?
This is one of the reasons why, kind of circling back to the beginning, where you as a cancer survivor and me as someone who is blind and the next person in the room who may have whatever, this is where you start to see the commonalities.
Right.
Because if you're in the middle of treatment, your needs are very specific. And for someone who hasn't gone through chemo, I have absolutely no way of knowing what they're going to be unless we're communicating, especially since it changes from day to day. I know that from watching my own kids. And likewise, for blindness, it's a lot of times it's getting a decent feel for what's around, or, sometimes it's being able to just discover my environment on my own rather than having someone push or pull or try to guide physically that may actually be worse. In the chronic pain arena, and I think you can probably relate to this, I don't know from day to day if I'm going to have a joint that's going to be, my knee, my elbow, my wrist, whatever. It may function fine that day. It may not work at all that day. And that's not something evident to the outside person. So it is about communication, not only because of accuracy, but also out of respect.
Right.
It's about me saying, I still want to own my space. Need the dignity, the autonomy, the respect to be able to communicate my needs without judgment, so that we could approach this with some sort of equilibrium.
Right. I remember, I think I saw this on Facebook, or, who knows, where, there was a lady at a street corner, and she had her cane. So clearly she was visually impaired. And these Boy Scouts probably came along and whisked her across the street. They were being so helpful. Get her to the other side. And she said, that's great, but I needed to go the other direction. And they had meant well, but it never occurred to anybody to just say, do you need help? And if so, can I help?
Absolutely. And that's, it's kind of a, well, I mean, it's kind of a stark example, but it's so true. And it's something you encounter quite frequently. You know, for a while with COVID, people stopped being quite so handsy because
Yeah, they couldn't reach out and just grab you and
Yeah.
move you, right? Mhm.
Yeah, but now that we're starting to transition back into something resembling pre-pandemic life, it is a conversation we have to have because, again, especially, and I have to make this point here too.
Mhm.
People who have some sort of disability, including those who are blind, are at drastically higher risk of being assaulted,
Right.
um, including and especially sexually assaulted.
Mhm.
It is very triggering for people, especially women, is my understanding.
Mhm.
But I don't like it either. But especially for women, being so cognizant of, if you put your hands on her without her consent,
Right.
without even saying something
Mhm.
first, you have a very high likelihood of absolutely messing up her day.
Right.
So,
Or being knocked flat.
yeah. And please understand, when I'm saying messing up her day, I'm not trying to be glib there. I'm just saying,
Right. Yeah, it's terrifying. Mhm.
yeah, it's something that we have got to be
Mhm.
more conscious of as a society and have those
Mhm.
conversations.
Well, I just think of, if somebody like the way my office is set up, my husband can easily come in very quietly and startle me.
Yeah.
He's clearly not meaning to, but I have my back to the door. And so he just comes in and he says hello or something. And I mean, I jump out of my chair, I yell at him, you know, and, but, and I can't imagine dealing with that all the time, always kind of being on that edge of the what if, and it is worse, even as you were saying, if someone reaches out and touches you and you're not expecting it, even
Yeah.
if they're just touching the back of your arm or, someplace when you're not expecting that, holy cow. I mean, that is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So how from the other perspective, how do we approach the situation to say, hey, Daniel, do you need assistance? How do we go about that so that we're not scaring the living daylights out of you, or worse, being condescending?
I think, I think you just hit it, hey, walking up and saying, hey, do you need assistance? Or
Mhm.
I help you with something,
Mhm.
or, even starting out with some sort of innocuous comment about the day or the weather,
Mhm.
or who knows.
Right. We're going, so they know you're even there. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And, I guess let's say that you have an extra spare minute
Mhm.
and you see someone loading boxes into the back of their car or something.
Mhm.
Oh, would you walk up and say, hey, can I help you with those
Right.
boxes?
Mhm.
Awesome. And if we're connecting human to human, I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
wisdom there.
Mhm.
Just saying, hey, would you like help with this?
Mhm.
Got it? Great. And don't be,
Right.
don't be offended, whatever the
Mhm.
response is, but just try to make it
Mhm.
natural, like you're helping human to
Mhm.
human, as opposed to trying to be the superhero, come in
Right.
to save a helpless person that
Mhm.
is be helpless.
Mhm. Right, yeah, because in many cases, they might not need our help.
Yep,
And as you said, being Superman and swooping in, it's not always appreciated.
exactly.
And you also we mentioned right at the very start that people have and had low expectations of someone who has some type of disability, and that's just horrible. But we do that. I mean, it's kind of the, well, oh, she can't do that because, so I'm just going to do it for her. or worse, we're just not even going to assume that they can do that. So how do we kind of get over that thought process also?
It's an interesting question that I have been toying with a lot, because you can find yourself overcorrecting to the point where you're like, well, I don't care if they have a disability. They can and they should do. Well, then that assumes that that person has been taught how to do X, Y, or Z, because we forget everyone has to learn how to do whatever they're doing at some point in their life.
Right.
Nobody comes out of the womb knowing how to do much of anything. So to say, okay, well, I become inclusive, I now expect people to do things for themselves. Well, that may or may not be the right step there, based on how experienced the other person may be, or if someone is new to having a disability and they're having to relearn how to do certain aspects of their life, that's a process too. So again, it comes back to communication. Hey, do you need assistance with this? You do. What assistance would be helpful? If you don't, great. Let me know if you need anything.
And as you said, it's just kind of one of those common respect type of things. You see somebody in the store and they can't reach something on a shelf. You say, hey, do you need assistance with that? And then you watch them climb the thing and you're like, okay, guess you didn't. But a big part of it is obviously the tone in how it's asked. And I think that's one of the things that we really just have to watch is, are we asking politely, or are we, again, assuming that they need our help, and that carries through in our tone?
Absolutely.
Well, it's one of the things, and COVID has, of course, made things all sorts of wonkadoodle now. How do we make our businesses more inclusive and accessible? And let's start with, if we're actually physically in a location, and then we'll talk about digitally later. But how do you make your business more inclusive and accessible?
Great. And I think there's always the beginning of the conversation of, do you have Braille signage? Do you have entrances and aisles or pathways that are, mobility friendly and things of that sort? But there again, do you have staff that are trained to be communicative? Are we setting that example as business owners? Are we teaching people not only to communicate, but also to understand that one's disability is a characteristic or possibly multiple characteristics? Nevertheless, it is out of a vast array of characteristics that each of us has. So being aware that we have to be conscious, but also be conscious of the whole human being. So conscious of just different skills and talents and whatever else, so that we are prepared to meet our customers as they are. And I don't know if you want to get into employment now, but there's kind of a separate side to that coin as well, where I think in that case, if we say we need this job or that job done, or we're hiring for this or that position, have we identified the core elements of that job, what actually has to be done, so that we're not letting implicit bias or assumptions block us from getting the best candidate? For example, when I was going through law school, my job was to read, analyze, and utilize the facts and opinions involving a case. I had to be able to understand the facts, I had to understand the law, and I had to turn it into something that demonstrated I knew what in the world I was talking about. Now, how I accessed the reading of that material, whether it was a print book, whether it was a PDF that I could scroll through. However I did it, that was immaterial.
Right.
Because the real question was, did I know what was going on? Could I use it? And could I communicate that? And I think we have to be really aware of questions like a big one in our community. This position requires a driver's license. Why? Can you give me a really solid reason why that position requires a driver's license?
Right.
Why that can't be done with a driver, why it can't be done with Uber, why it can't be done remotely. Because if you can't, then perhaps completely without intending to, created a discriminatory job posting.
Right.
I don't have a driver's license. And if I turn over my state ID, I have outed myself. Most likely. And that's a common one.
One of the ones that I always see is must be able to lift 25 pounds. Why? What in that position, why is lifting 25 pounds even pertinent?
Exactly. Or why does the ability to see or hear or whatever, is it really important to that job, or is there a reasonable workaround?
Right.
Because if you don't have, just to be real here, if you don't have a statement, a strong accessibility and inclusion statement partnering with that, I read that posting, I may not even apply.
Right.
And if I do apply, I'm already having a sense of dread or foreboding saying they're probably not going to hire me as soon as they see my white cane. Now, that's hard for me as a job seeker. That hurts you as a business owner.
Right.
Because all of the brilliance, all of the talent I could team is now lost.
Right. And a lot of those job descriptions were written 10, 20, who knows, years ago, or copied from somebody else. And we don't even read them. It's the old, well, we're doing this because that's the way we've always done it. But it's as you said, it's kind of that red flag where if I don't even notice that I've got it in my job description, what are other things that are going to cause problems? And so, yeah, it pays to look through those things and say, really, if you can get the job done, that it's as you said, it's those specific things that need, is to be done, but nothing else, needs to be in there.
And you know what? I'm going to make an offer here that I wasn't even thinking about when we started this conversation, based on what you just told me. My social links, or the social links for the organization, all of that's going to be in the show notes. If you're a business owner or an HR person or somebody who's dealing with this, send me a job proposal that you have posted, or a few if you want to. And someone from my team will take a look at it and say, hey, this is either green light, or here are some things you might want to reconsider. And we will even set up a 30-minute Zoom call if you want and talk through what we found. We will do that for free, no obligation. If you want to make a donation to Pieces of Me based on that work, we can certainly use it, but it's up to you and how much value you think we brought to the table.
That's fabulous. Thank you for that offer.
Absolutely.
And as you said, our goal is that we have the best employees doing the best job. And a lot of that other stuff doesn't matter in the slightest.
Absolutely.
So, now we're in many cases 100% digital, not going into the office. So, people aren't having to worry about, okay, are the halls wide enough? Oh my gosh, we've got stairs coming in, all of those various things, but that causes other issues. So talk to us about how this whole new digital world can raise all sorts of problems now.
So I read a survey somewhere along the path that said that 97% of websites are at least somewhat inaccessible.
Mhm.
And based on my experience and experience of the blind people I talk to, or people who access websites in different ways, that is more or less true. And it may even be, it's at least comparable, possibly even worse with
Mhm.
web applications
Mhm.
or mobile applications. Now, I think it's important to stop here and say, what does accessibility mean? Because this is based on a conversation I recently had where we were speaking Greek, or it seemed that way.
Mhm.
So when I log on to a website, when I'm using my iPad to navigate apps, I'm using a built-in software called VoiceOver,
Mhm.
which is it's basically a narration tool that reads what screen to me and helps me navigate the different buttons in place of using regular, well, I guess it's kind of a modified touch, or in place of using a mouse. And
Okay.
so we run into two primary problems here. One is when we have images or graphics that are trying to convey pertinent information, if we're not using alternative text, or what we call
Right.
alt,
Mhm.
then I have no idea what is in that image. It could be something useless, just kind of something just to grab the eye, or it could be relaying all of the relevant information for signing up for something, because
Right.
I've seen things that do both. And odds are, if somebody hasn't taken the time to do alt text, it's going to say image or 9724 blah 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 blah
Right.
blah.
Mhm. And
And
I'm guilty of that all the time. In fact, it might say, a description of the image, and dang if I don't delete it. So it's even worse.
and and so I want to and this is something we're trying to get out to people, because
Mhm.
most people don't know to do it, and most people I've seen even on my team,
Mhm.
when you're training people to do this, it's, well, what do I say and how do I put this, and I don't want to miss something. I can only speak for myself here. I recognize effort. I
Mhm.
recognize someone
Right.
tried text what they thought was relevant.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's too little. You're like, okay, they at least tried. I get the point that they're trying to make here.
Mhm.
Thumbs up.
Mhm.
But if we're not doing that, we're missing out on a lot of the information we're trying to convey. It really makes it a little bit more difficult to establish the kind of rapport you want to have with your customers or your employees.
Mhm.
And I'll even drop in a little note here and say, using alt text also increases your SEO.
Mhm.
Let's put out documents saying, if you have alt text, then the pictures that we can't do anything with for search engine optimization,
Right.
use
Mhm.
alt text for that, and we're good.
Mhm.
So basically, if you open up a Nat Geo or some other magazine, and you see below the picture, there's a caption in the italic, right? Picture shows soldier standing over hill or something.
Mhm.
That's effectively it.
Right.
The other issue that we commonly run into
Mhm.
is buttons that are not properly labeled. So tabs
Mhm.
or whatever.
Mhm.
Now, I have to emphasize, alt text is important. Buttons are at least, if not more important, because if I cannot tell what a button is or what kind of menu I'm trying to access, or if the thing is not coded to where I can use keyboard or voiceover commands to activate that box,
Mhm.
I may have no other choice but just completely abandon that
Right.
transaction.
Mhm.
And for those that are wondering, we gave out the 1 in 4 stat earlier with disabilities. it's hard to really identify how many of us use the alternative technology that can come into play here. But I can't tell you the number of Americans, at least, and this is at least as many, if not more, worldwide, or proportionally. But in the US, it's approximately, I think, somewhere in the area of 10 million or so people who are blind impaired. It's a lot of people. And if you look at other countries, maybe that percentage is a little less. In a lot of places, that percentage is higher. So it's not
probably a good average.
Yeah.
Well, and if we're cognizant of thinking, okay, is whatever I'm doing helping those with visual impairments, then you're going to start thinking about other things too. Okay, is this good for ADD? Is this good for, all of those various things? And so that's, when we start putting ourselves into that frame of mind, that's where we do it. And it's funny because we make big assumptions, or we, like the alt text for images, it's condescending and disrespectful on my part. I'm just going to own up to it right here. To not put that text, just assuming, well, it's a picture. What does it matter? Yep. Right? It does matter. Because it's, even if it's just saying, here's image shows picture of 4 people standing there. Well, then you get that in your mind, and that helps tell the rest of the story. If I just assume, well, it doesn't matter. For one thing, if it doesn't matter, then why do I have it there? Right. Yep. If it doesn't matter, then okay, it's I've just put something fluff in there that really doesn't need to be there. But yeah, it's those things. And it's funny, you and I had this, earlier today. I've got a form that goes out to all our guests to have it filled out so that it prepares me for the program. And it asks for things like your bio, if you have an unusual name, asks, how to pronounce it, website links, it asks for your image, all of those various things. And it's just, this form that I have created on the website, using whatever the form creator thingy is. And it didn't occur to me until about, midnight last night, that maybe you weren't going to be able to provide that information. And it's like, okay, silly me, you very wisely were able to work around me being a dingbat, but we shouldn't have to do that. It should just be something that I should be able to know, okay, this form needs to work for anyone. And even if it's just that I redo the form and I send it to you and say, hey, Daniel, try and fill this out, kind of like how you offered to look at somebody's, job description. Sometimes it's just a matter of asking someone, hey, does this work for you?
Absolutely. And, we do offer services like that. We're getting into the remediation space, or we'll take a look at a website or a form and say, not only here are your pain points, but here is either how you can fix it, how we can help you fix it. We're happy to have those conversations. And I get it. It all comes down to whether you want to call it dog whistles or subliminal messaging, how we approach these things, or how businesses approach these things. It sends a message of either I am taking the steps to become more aware, become more inclusive, or I am shut off to it. And it may not be, it probably isn't something that business owners are even aware of.
Right.
But you can raise that level of consciousness and say, you don't have to be perfect today. But are you at least willing to try to incorporate this into what you're doing? And are you willing to accept help that is readily available?
Right. Well, for example, my form, I could have just had something, very simple along the lines of, if the form doesn't work, email us this information. and because, just because, there are a variety of times where the form might not work, and so, yeah, it's just kind of being cognizant of that, and it is, sometimes it's the little things, but it makes a huge difference. My mom has almost completely lost her sight due to macular degeneration. Bless her, she's 89 and she still emails. She still does. Now she can't text anymore. She finally has reached the point where she can't text. But if I send her an email, all I have to do is remember, make it a bigger font, and then she can read it. And then when I look back at it, it's, I'm sitting here squinting at I'm like, really, it'd help if it was bigger for me too. But yeah, I mean, just simple little things like that are so easy to do that we don't even really think about them sometimes. And then when we do, it's like, well, doy.
Absolutely. And, with your mom, I realize somebody who's 89, that's something. But there is kind of a misconception out there that if you reach a certain age that you just kind of have to grin and bear it.
Right.
But, there are things out there. I mean, again, I'd be happy to connect her and connect you with resources that may be helpful.
Oh, she's always looking for stuff. She got a new, I call it a toy, last week from her eye doctor that connects to her TV screen. And, and I mean, she's very excited about it. Anybody else would go, I should just sit here and be pitiful. Not my mother.
Well, this is why we built Pieces, so that we can bring people in, young from all kinds of different backgrounds, and say, we're not going to say there's a one size fits all solution, but where are you at? What are your goals? What will realistically fit into your life? And how do we help you get those things so that your life is a little easier, a little bit more rewarding, whatever the case may be. So yeah, definitely. I'd be happy to have that conversation.
I love it. And whether it's the workplace or life, all of those various things, one of the things that we have become very conscious of is diversity, is inclusivity. But we think about it for race, we think about it for gender, all of those things. And we totally forget that there's a whole nother population that we need to be including also. And, when we include the best employees, the best customers, all of those various things, it's only going to benefit everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, getting back to that point, whether it's in some companies have started to talk about neurodiversity and how different ways of thinking about the world, which is effectively what neurodiversity is, how that strengthens the overall dialogue. And if you think about, how I may navigate something, so sensory diversity, that's help design a product that is ultimately better for everybody if we're thinking different ways of accessing things, or just the experience of, well, I have come from this background. I've seen challenges from this side of things, which has shaped my perspective. That gets us out of the box of whatever problem we're trying to solve. And it really makes us question those fundamental assumptions, which sometimes those assumptions, they'll withstand scrutiny, and that way they stay. And sometimes they don't withstand scrutiny. And this is what catapults us to get rid of things that are outdated, arcane, or just plain wrong.
Right.
Which leads us to a better solution. That's the point of diversity, what lens you're looking at it through.
Right. And some of it is, as you said, is just kind of common sense. One of my favorite things that I saw on Facebook one time was, okay, for you older people, which they were meaning somebody my age, how many times have we had to get, like we're cooking something and the instructions are so small, we can't read them. And so we take a picture with our phone and expand it. Okay, if it's too small for people who don't have vision problems, then, it's too small. It's just, and so that company needs to make it bigger. And just kind of all of those things where just some common sense sometimes would work.
Absolutely.
Well, oh my gosh, Daniel, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and this has been absolutely fascinating. And I've learned so much, and I love it. Tell people how they reach you and how they connect with your organization.
Absolutely. So we really encourage people to like and follow us on social, because that's where we can interact. That's where people start to learn from one another and really build that rapport. We are currently undergoing a major update on the website, so check that out. Give us some feedback. What would be helpful? What would come across there? And we are also planning to have at least one event per month throughout 2022 on a variety of different topics. My team, each of them has taken on a role of planning an event.
Cool.
And different topics, different ways to examine this problem. So come check those out. Our topic for February is going to be health equity, which is going to be looking at things from a variety of different perspectives. It's going to, I think, have a lot of things that even people who are experienced in the field may learn. And for somebody who's walking into this, it may just be very eye-opening. That's my goal as I conduct that particular meeting.
I love it. I love it. And your website is piecesofme.org. And again, that's PEACES of me.org. And I will put that in the show notes, and we'll also have your email in there, since you suggest that people contact you. We will have that in there. What are the services that your organization provides?
So we are mostly in the awareness and understanding and educational business. So we provide access to resources, stories, different things that are going to help spur that understanding forward. We don't generally do a lot in the way of direct support, but we can certainly help you find organizations that do, because our role here wasn't to say, let's go reinvent the wheel. Our goal was to say, how do we get people from where they are to where they want to be? And if somebody's out there performing whatever service is needed to be performed well, then okay, all we got to do is connect them with that service and everybody wins.
Right. I love it. I love it. Well, again, it's Pieces of Me. Well, it's the Pieces of Me Foundation, and it's piecesofme.org, PEACES. So make sure that you have that. Well, oh my gosh, Daniel, like I said, this has been absolutely fantastic. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Final thought here is everyone has something to learn, and everyone has something to contribute.
I love it. Short, sweet, and absolutely on point. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having a wonderful time talking with Daniel Hodges. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.